I've written many papers over many years, and I've spoken a lot on the media about what is juvenile justice like in the Northern Territory. Well, I don't think there's a better way of answering it than looking at it here. This is it. In fact, it could be said that it's not juvenile justice in the Northern Territory. This is actually the legal system of the Northern Territory, which is one great whopping jail. And as you can see, with all the accoutrements, barbed wire en masse, steel fencing, poles, we've got brick walls. And then of course, let's go and have a better look. Then of course we've got, over the fencing, we've got the buildings, the brick buildings, and inside the buildings there are the things that we know as cells, not rooms, cells. Now this looks so sick because it is, and it is because this was Berrima Prison for adults. It was built in 1979 and it was condemned in 2012 and shut down in 2014, and so it should have been. But in 2015 the then government up here decided to reopen it, scrub it up a bit, and put children from the then Dondale detention facility, which is 500 metres down the road, in here to deal with them because they were creating trouble. Now we all know what happened then. We had, in 2016, Four Corners did a number on this place. The country went mad. It reacted with anger, shock, tears, and within 24 hours the Prime Minister of Australia called a Royal Commission, and that Royal Commission looked into Dondale, here and over there, and what was going on in there, which was brutality, assaults, psychological assaults, physical assaults, spit hoods, gassing, restraint chairs, isolation, you name it. It was Australia's shame. We had a Royal Commission, it went for a year. It unearthed all that and more, and what's more, as a Royal Commission, as you'd expect, it also called in expert evidence about how you deal with children who breach the law and at times have to be detained, delinquents if you like. We had expert evidence from Europe, Spain, Scotland, we had New Zealand experts, we had some from the United States and Australia, showing us how it should be done, how it is done everywhere else. And most of it wasn't new. That was in 2017. Since then, that means this place has been opened, housing kids since 2015, which is 7 years. In 2017, one of the main recommendations was, as you might expect, that it be shut down. Another one accompanying it was that if you build a facility, it has to be purpose-built and it has to be away from the adult jail. The government have ignored both of those recommendations. It's now June 2022 and there are record numbers in there. There's probably over 40 kids in there as we speak. Now what I want to do now is I want to take you over to a section of this jail called B Block, where a lot of the kids are kept. As previously flagged, this is in fact, I'm standing in front of B Block through the fencing there, which was, when Berrima Prison was for adult males, the maximum security section. So that block that you're looking at now contained the cells which contained the worst of the worst. The serial killers, the rapists, and also, to protect themselves, the child sex offenders. So the men that were kept in there were not allowed out to mix with the other men. Now in that block now, and let's just recap what we're talking about here. We're talking about children that are being kept in here. Not men, not adults, children. And all of them are Indigenous. There is not one white child in there, and nor would there be, would there? Because it wouldn't be countenanced, it wouldn't be allowed. And that gives you the explanation how in God's name this is going on in this country, because the explanation is quite simple: racism. But to go back, B Block contains a large number of cells, and a lot of these kids occupy those cells. At the moment, there are bordering on record numbers in there. Last year they passed legislation which purposely and effectively trebled the population of the kids being detained. Many of them go in there, whether it's because of COVID aspects or staff shortages, which is a perennial problem, but they go into lockdown in there for 7 days at a time and sometimes more. I came into this situation recently because I represent an 11-year-old child who was kept in this prison for 3 months off and on. He was 11 years old, a boy, an Indigenous boy from Darwin. And part of his detention included being in this B block, occupying a cell on his own for, in isolation, 22 to 23 hours every day. He was locked in that cell on his own. A cell occupied by previously God knows whom. And all these other children are in there, in that cell. Now, you might find this unbelievable and incredible, and it's both, but it's also unlawful, of course, which won't surprise you. All of this is in complete breach of the minister's duty of care. Now, there's record numbers of Indigenous kids in there, and many of them are already suffering from trauma-induced injuries as a consequence of coming from particularly difficult and dysfunctional households. There's expert evidence on it. My client had psychological reports for the court that informed the judge that detained him in here that he had a condition which led to impulsive behaviour and the like. Now, the last thing a kid like that needs is to be put in a place like that. And you don't have to be a psychologist to know that. And the minister knows that. But this is what the minister does. So this is clearly, from a lawyer's perspective, a gross breach, a reckless breach of their duty of care. This is reckless negligence. And what we know from this is that the great likelihood is that these children are going to be further damaged. And what we also know as a consequence of all of this is that when these children are eventually released, the odds on money is that they're going to go back and do exactly the same kind of thing that they were doing, which led to their original being charged and incarcerated. And everybody in this game knows that. The minister, the prison officers, the judges, the police, the defense lawyers, the prosecutors. We all know this as an inevitable fact. And yet this charade, this sick, absurd circus continues. And of course, what we've discovered thanks to the media and deep throats leaking is that from July to December last year, there were 54 instances in there of children committing self-harm and attempted suicide. And only 2 weeks ago, it was reported by the local newspaper that a boy stabbed himself in an attempt to take his own life. He stabbed himself in the stomach. He was evacuated to the prison, to the hospital. He was treated. He was returned to his cell in isolation, where he proceeded to rip his stitches out. There was a boy in an adjacent cell, I heard from his mother, who bit in through the skin and flesh of his hand and became hospitalized. On that weekend, there were 4 children, including those 2 alone, who were hospitalized because of self-harm incidents, self-harm committed by individual children. And this is where it all leads to.
This is private government property.
Now, driven to despair, if you like, but not despair, driven to action. On Christmas morning, my client's grandmother and other family members, Indigenous ladies from here in Darwin, got together and formed the Closed On Dale Now movement, because we realised that there is no way in this world that any politician of any ilk will do anything to ameliorate this, because it's not in their political interests. They will not do anything that will be perceived or alleged as being soft on crime. So they continue the sick, descending cycle. The only way this can stop, and it must stop today, is for direct action to be taken by citizens. People like my client's grandmother, people like the others that have joined from all walks of life, young, old, Indigenous, non-Indigenous. But the truth of the matter is, we've been campaigning now for 6 months, and we've been doing everything that we could within our powers to encourage others to join us and to have this stop. We've had stalls at markets, we've had demonstrations, we've met with the minister, we're handing and giving and selling t-shirts, stickers, you name it. All of these things we do regularly. We vigil here every Friday night to shout out to the kids, to let them know that we still care for them and that there are people that are trying to end this, and also try and uplift the public awareness. And if truth be known, if truth be told, we've failed. It's been a failure. It's still going on, and what's more, our numbers haven't really increased. And that really says everything about the state of this nation in many respects. It really speaks to what Australians have become like in June 2022, because it would appear, perhaps unlike after Four Corners 5 years ago, 6 years ago, perhaps unlike then, Australians now have less care. There is a lack of care in our community for anybody outside our own bubble, really. And this is probably as serious as anything going on in this country. So, that doesn't mean it has to end. This has to end now. And it can end. Now, in February of this year, my client's grandmother, Donna Hunter, and Tanya Williams, a Larrakia lady, approached and spoke with Anthony Albanese, the then opposition leader in Darwin, when he was attending the commemoration of the Darwin bombing in February. And they gave him a petition describing all of what I've tried here and asking for his help and beseeching him to do something about it in the federal parliament. He's now Prime Minister of Australia with a majority. And the federal government has the legislative and the constitutional power to end this tomorrow. And we are asking him again to do that very thing. Nothing less, nothing in between. End it. It's so bad. All he needs to do is pass a bill, make it an act that renders the continued detention of any child in the current Dondale detention facility unlawful. And that's it. They have to find another place. They have to build another appropriate place. And they have to do it pronto. And they could have been doing this in the last 5 years, and they have chosen not to. So that's what I ask Mr. Albanese now on behalf of Donna Hunter, Tanya Williams, and the other members of the group, and the other civilized members of society. End this barbarism now.